Thank you so much. And I will try to do everything I can in Spanish, but my Spanish is a bit rusty, so sorry for any error that you cannot. We heard yesterday about many of the challenges in the world of logistics, but also opportunities to make our business grow. Some of the challenges have been from the cost of containers and delays to now a shortage of qualified labor force and increasing costs throughout the supply chain. Today, the cost is not the only factor which drives investments, and it's also the trustworthiness of suppliers and labor force, access to inventories and stock, and access to a broad network which is trustworthy. We will now be speaking about nearshoring. But since Mexico is the destination for first level investments due to its superiority in logistics and its proximity to the US market, we could not have better panelists here than our friends Ricardo Colomé, World Trade Center Guadalajara, Francisco Javier Solís of World Trade Center Nuevo Laredo, and Mario Baez Camargo of World Trade Center San Luis Potosí. So let's begin with this great panel who are in the business of logistics, which is the topic of our conference. First, we will have a few presentations. And the question is, as logistics actors in the World Trade Center's network, all of you are unique. And could you describe your business plan and also your World Trade Center model? First, we'll begin with Mario. Good morning to all of you. Thank you for being here. Thank you, Guadalajara. You always receive us with open arms, a beautiful city. And I am not fortunate enough to live here, but I'd love to. I'm going to begin very quickly with what we do in San Luis Potosí. We are part of a group called Valoran, which is a group that has several lines of business, highways and stops, and it has housing, family housing, and also an industrial branch, which is where I work. We, as part of the World Trade Center, we're called Industrial World Trade Center. We say that we are a premium park as we offer infrastructure that is world class in our park. We have two parks at this point which are working. One of them has 750 hectares. It has a capacity of about 20,000 daily workers. We have the third largest employer in San Luis Potosí in our park, and most of our clients are European or American, Japanese clients, and some Chinese are starting to arrive clients. In our park, there are many amenities. We like to offer things that other parks may not offer. We have a hotel, we have a fast food area, an office building, and we have the intermodal terminal by Kansas City, the largest in the country in operation today, which was the origin of our park. We began with that terminal in a partnership with Kansas City. Kansas City also bought our own part and is the operator. We also have a strategic fiscal precinct, which I think is very important in logistics because of what it represents and because of this scheme that provides great advantages. Those of you who haven't no information about it, research it. It's a regime that works very well. I will be giving you a summary of how it works. And here we also have the importers, one of the most important importers of Amazon. 80% of merchandise goods of Amazon goes through this precinct, which is called Weldex, and they are located inside the precinct. Here, this customs, ouch, this customs area where we have different clients who buy the land and build their plants and warehouses. They can receive merchandise directly from China without having to pay at the customs at ports. It reaches the park directly. And at the park, we have our own customs. Many of the advantages of this type of fiscal precinct or customs area is that merchandise can be there up to 60 months. If any of the products in the shipment has any problem to exit this customs area, it will not stop the rest of the shipment. You can exit different products, and if there are any permits issues with the rest of the merchandise, then they go out one by one. So it does not stop the entire shipment. And also, you do not pay taxes until the merchandise leaves the customs area if it's going to be sold domestically. And if it's going to be sold in the US, you do any transformation of the products and then ship it to the US without the need to pay more taxes. This is a very attractive model. It's not very well known, unfortunately. The government does not promote it as it should, but we believe it is one of the advantages that we have in our park, combined with the intermodal terminal by Kansas City, which then makes it very attractive. This precinct has different schemes. Before, you had to be within a defined area to use this, but now there is a remote scheme. So even though you're not inside that area, you can still operate in that fiscal precinct. We have a fluids terminal where we have a warehousing capacity of 300,000 barrels. ExxonMobil is our main client, and we bring gasoline, red, green, whatever type of gasoline you want, and diesel. We still would like to expand to 400,000 barrels. As an example, the city of San Luis Potosí has the Pemex terminal with a capacity of 100,000 barrels. We have 3 more times than that. And we also know that with our dependence time is just 1 day of not having a supply, and for gasoline stations to be lacking supply. We've seen this. We saw this a few years ago, this lack of supply. We have the WC2, 1,500 hectares, which is under development. The first park is 95% occupation. We have Goodyear has a plant there with 20 hectares, just the main plant. It is the most modern plant by Goodyear worldwide, as they have said. These are high velocity tires, which are almost all exported. We have Bebe, they have Transformers, Faurecia, a French company who just bought Hella, and we have Autonem. So we have many companies in automobiles. Also, we have 2 car assembly plants in a radius of less than 5 kilometers from where we are. And this allows us to offer very good service to these car plants. When we present our park to clients, we do say that we are part of WTC because we believe that the networking, we boast this because whatever this can present to clients is very important, and it gives certainty to foreign clients who reach Mexico. They can relate this name to stability, the WTC, and with many commercial advantages, which for us are a very important starting point. So let's not lose any more time. We'll just see a few videos and presentations. Yes, we have time for a video. This is a view of the offices, the communities within the park. ¿Se puede bajar la música del video? No, ¿verdad? And the connectivity in San Luis, this has the hectares, 2,100 hectares, no? Between both parks, this is Park 1, which as you can see is practically finished. This is number 2. So we still have a lot of land if you're interested. We have a power station and all of the infrastructure that is required by a park with these characteristics. We have two main businesses. We sell industrial plots, urbanized, and we have virtual solutions. This is the intermodal terminal combined with the fiscal precinct and the free trade zone, as we said. This is a great combination. This is a view of this terminal. We have clients such as Honda. When they made CRV here, a lot of the merchandise reached us directly, and then it was sent to Guadalajara because it was faster without having to go through customs in Manzanillo. We also have a power generation plant with gas, which gas before the war was the cheapest source of energy generation. It comes from the U.S. through the pipeline. These are some of our clients. And this is a view of the WTC 1. Well, I think the video says a lot more than I can explain to you. Thank you so much, Mario. Es una infraestructura muy impresionante. Hay que pensar. So, Francisco, the same question to you. Good morning to everyone, and thank you so much for the opportunity to be with you. Dr. Carlos Romero, thank you for the invitation. And our host, excellent host, thank you so much. You make us feel at home. I'm going to make this presentation of what we call the two Laredos, which it's very difficult to speak of Nuevo Laredo without including Laredo, Texas, and vice versa. We are the border of northern Mexico, where there is more synergy, where there is more integration than in any other border area in the country. 75 to 80% of the economy depends on that integration between both cities. Everything that is related to services, logistics, customs, carriers, industry is a unique integration. We don't see this at any other border point to this level, to this magnitude. I'm going to say I'm sorry, but my presentation is in Tex-Mex. In English and Spanish, it suddenly says year or año. I do it for you, Robin. Okay. So now the message by our mayor, a very forward-looking person who bets highly on Nuevo Laredo. She was here in Guadalajara, Jalisco at the end of July and signed agreements with the government of the city of Guadalajara and also the state of Jalisco by means of COMCE de Occidente. She was here 2 or 3 days with the business people, and she made a commitment to support everyone here in Jalisco and Guadalajara and the region that requires the services of Nuevo Laredo. So we have here a very important partner. This is a short message by her. 6,000 trailers exchange merchandise between the US and Mexico. Around 1,400 rail cars cross the border every day as part of the dynamic commercial relationship which characterizes us. Thanks to our great port authorities, we are the most important logistics and customs platform in Mexico and the US. Nuevo Laredo is also a strategic point for investment and industry with a very important labor force, world class, which throughout the years has guaranteed the development of the economy of our city through our 11 industrial parks. And we are the main meeting point for business. Our convention center, hotels, museums, are the richness of our dishes, and the recreation areas make us a unique border area. We are Nuevo Laredo, the new heart of Tamaulipas. Nuevo Laredo is considered the capital of the customs area of Latin America. Our geographic location gives us a strategic point for commercial exchange between the most industrialized countries in the continent, Mexico and the United States. Today, our border is going through a new area of progress where every day we work to strengthen the binational relation with our neighboring country and creating joint actions to consolidate our leadership in foreign trade and logistics. 40% of the commercial exchange passes through our border between Mexico and the US, which has committed us to create synergies with institutions and private initiative and create projects jointly for infrastructure and development, which allow us to increase our competitiveness. In Nuevo Laredo, we have a lot to offer. Beyond our privileged location, we have a commercial infrastructure backed by our experts in foreign commerce and logistics. Without a doubt, we are the ideal meeting point to unite nations and do business. This is Nuevo Laredo, the customs capital of Latin America. So, Nuevo Laredo, we are a project which is just in the oven now, cooking. We are going to bring out the bread, which will be very nice and warm, and we will begin what are three very important projects in Nuevo Laredo and Laredo, Texas. I just want to give you, I'll be the first to recognize what this really means, the port of both Laredos, of the two Laredos. So that you may know, we every year transport 4.5 million trucks, cargo trucks, by our border and the port of Laredo. 15,000 trucks every day cross the Nuevo Laredo border. The port of Laredo, Texas, the number 3 port of the U.S. after Chicago and Los Angeles, with practically a collection of $250 billion, 40% of international commerce for Mexico is what it represents, the customs area in Nuevo Laredo. And since we started in the last 10 years, practically with the growth that we have had with the treaty for with US and Canada, the TEMEC, we have had an increase of up to 60% in cargo traffic. For us, in the two Laredos, driving through Monterrey, Laredo, Laredo to San Antonio, Monterrey, and Dallas, Texas. This is basically having to the highways even more cargo trucks than cars. So, of course, it has a few disadvantages for safety, traffic, but this is the impact that we have had thanks to this commercial relationship between the three countries. Nuevo Laredo, regardless of its geographic location, We haven't left everything to geography. We have clusters that are very important in all of the service areas. We have clusters with more than 500 customs agents, which operate in Nuevo Laredo and Laredo, Texas, more than 500 registered lines of logistics parks and offices in both Laredos. We have also more than 300 names and plants warehouses where we give logistics services and product distribution and final packaging. For your knowledge, for your information, Laredo has more square meters of warehouses than the city of Dallas and Houston together. With that perspective, you can see what is happening in Laredo and in Nuevo Laredo. Yesterday we spoke of Buca and what happened these last 2 years. Yes, there has been a lot of uncertainty. Also, Laredo suffered from this in the year 1920 against what really crossed the border of Nuevo Laredo and what was the revenue of our port. There was a great decrease and fall in revenue of about 20% in its income. And the last year, 2021, we were able to recover and it grew. It grew in comparison to 2019, about 8%. So the e-commerce, the impacts that it's had, but a very important aspect for us, which we experience at the border, is the lack of drivers, lack of cargo truck drivers. It is a very real and serious problem in the U.S. Infrastructure, both in the U.S. and Mexico, definitely we are falling behind. We are having infrastructure problems, and also the impact that we all know in the geopolitical area. As in general information, the average of the shipment costs went up to 8 times after the pandemics. This is what we saw during the pandemics. The lead time for international shipment delivery increased 25%. And according to the American Truck Association in the US, consider that now there's a deficit of up to 80,000 truck drivers only in the US. That's only in the US. According to Canacar, the Nuevo Laredo office, they estimate that in Mexico there are 30,000 drivers which are lacking. Another very interesting and important element of our project in World Trade Center with respect to infrastructure in the US, because of bad infrastructure, productivity is practically having about 425,000 drivers sitting in their truck without working the entire year. That's what it's equivalent to. That is the impact of the condition of the infrastructure. Practically $74 billion per year on the U.S. economy due to inefficiencies. They say that 80,000 drivers are lacking, but it's as if 425,000 were just sitting there, so we can do the math. We expect that by 2035, according to the Transportation Department of Texas, this will increase to 65% the movement of cargo with this Laredo port. This will increase 65% for CBP, Customs and Border Protection. This is a major issue already, together with the Transportation Department, because every year we have an increase of 6 or 7%. Laredo, Nuevo Laredo, 81% of our transport and movement is by cargo trucks. Rail, 17%, but rails are going to be growing about 60% in the next 5 years. Right now, Kansas City also has a very important project in Nuevo Laredo, investment greater than $200 million, with an intermodal terminal which will be huge, including double track lines up to Laredo, Texas. It has been approved, and they started the construction of a new rail bridge between the two Laredos. So these are the projects which for us in the WTC, our priority, our main project is the development on 17 hectares of ultra mixed use, where we have hospitals, speaking about medical tourism for people coming from the southern United States. We also have hotels, vertical housing, which is becoming very important, and this has been stressing the project. An important commercial area, a mall, and corporate offices. Another great virtue of the cluster of the two Laredos is the international banking. We are pioneers in international banking for obvious reasons. So there is a lot of opportunity with respect to offices. We also have the development of 300 hectares for industrial and logistics services in Nuevo Laredo. And we also have developments for 200 hectares in Laredo, Texas for logistics services and supply chain, where we can provide as a World Trade Center the services as World Trade Center. And we also have cooking up and have already signed an agreement for the Nuevo Laredo airport to be able to develop it as an airport, especially for cargo.
Laredo, Texas has 51 parks, industrial parks or logistic parks. Nuevo Laredo 11. And today, only in Laredo, Texas, there are 6,000 hectares in development, industrial and logistic. With a little bit of imagination, I thank you. That is the map of both Laredos. You will see a line, well, some curves in black, which is the Bravo River. The south part and southwest is Nuevo Laredo, and the northeast is Laredo, Texas. The part that you see below is Highway 85 that comes from Monterrey. You go in, and before reaching the city, 20 kilometers before, you go to the highway, which we call the Met 2, that goes straight to the Commerce Bridge, which is where all of the cargo goes through, both towards the USA and Canada, as the ones that comes to Mexico. There is where we will develop the logistic project, where we have the question of developing the park. In the city, in the southeast part of the city, close to what is the urban site, we will develop the main offices, 17 hectares of WTCs. It is a very ambitious project, unique in the border. There is nothing, not even in Tijuana or Ciudad Juarez, we don't have any project as such. And with the brand and the services and the experiences, they also develop on Highway 35, which is the highway that we use to go to Canada, practically. They are developing the other logistic project in the USA. What does this represent, these opportunities? It's easy from the point of view of what is happening in the USA. We need to turn into suppliers of services, providers of services in the border. The business of the group parties in logistics and now pool parties according to the responsibility that one takes. In the USA, it's a business of $157 million a year. And yearly, it grows 7%. Here, we have the opportunity of doing network of the World Trade Centers in the USA to adjust ourselves and change and look for opportunity areas, because like we spoke with the name and the branding of the World Trade Center, definitely we can be very attractive to give services and at the same time create synergies among all of us. As an additional fact, 96% of the 514 companies that are in the in the 500 most important, 96% uses this type of services. So the opportunity for the World Trade Center is there. Lastly, without coming in, because I'm not an expert, and our World Trade Center friends bring their experts in technology, and I don't want to be ashamed, but I want to put at your disposition the doors that we have been able to create and open with the people in the USA, especially with Texas A&M, the university that has their own business center in Laredo. And it is the ones that we are working with for the development and implementation of technologies. Technologies that come to change the life of what we do, how we do logistics, and how we give our services. For CBP, for the government of the USA, it is very important because there is no infrastructure that will last. 65% of growth in 8 or 10 years. So, what they need is to change procedures, systems, and above all, to have the trust that what is doing this side of the border complies with the requirements that they have. We have, thanks to the alliances that we have with the university, Texas A&M, and we are about to create the same in Austin with the University of Texas. We have the opportunity of having access to methodologies, technologies that can be, in a way, favorable to you, for you to use it as well as the people here in San Luis Potosí. Okay, I won't tire you anymore with Nuevo Laredo, and we have time for Q&As. Thank you, Francisco. On the topic of shortage of truck drivers, in the USA, the salary of a truck driver is $100,000 per year, guaranteed, and they can't find them. It's incredible. So, Ricardo, thank you very much. Good morning, everyone. I'm going to talk to you a little bit of what we do in Guadalajara World Trade Center. Guadalajara World Trade Center has around 30 years operating in services that are specialized, that are mainly the management of merchandises of international trade. They manage international trade merchandises in a custom. It is what really gives the added value to this operation. This operation looks to give the import and export and everyone that participates in this movement of merchandises the security or the safety of knowing that the merchandise comes in or out of the country, complying, first of all, with all of the rules that trade and regulations establishes by the authority in the customs, and to make sure that they comply. Our function is to give the authority the security of knowing that they are covering all the aspects of foreign trade. And on the other hand, we need to give the importer and exporter to, to be sure that their merchandise will be treated as the type of merchandises demand. I'm talking about the type of merchandise because there are different merchandises, type of merchandises that require a special infrastructure that will see to that merchandise. The traditional, the the dry cargo, which is electronics and automotive, that requires certain care that normally are signed or signaled in the package. There are there is a good part of that merchandise that brings internally some objects, additional objects that they try to protect the management of this merchandise. What we call chismographies. They control that they respect the cold chain that they need, that controls that the merchandise will be managed within certain type of movements that are not harsh, that this type of movements does not exceed any type of vertical movements, and in these seismographs they register it. We have to protect these certain conditions and the maneuvers that are made in the merchandise. On the other hand, like you know, merchandises fly because it's urgent for them to arrive to the destination. So the speed at which they process the merchandise from the time they arrive to the fiscal precincts and they get on the plane, and the other way around, the speed by which they are lowered from the planes and unloaded and given to the importer are not of not many hours. And I speak about not many hours because a good part of the merchandise that arrives to our warehouses go out on the same day. Another important aspect is that some leave on the second day. That could be 70% of the merchandises that we obtain, and another part requires the compliance of certain norms and regulations that demand that the merchandise may remain a couple of more days. But what the importer requires is exactly to be delivered as fast as possible. So we need to make sure the safety of the merchandise under any circumstance, the speed by which it is delivered, and we also need to give visibility and transparency to all of the players where the merchandise is. They require information. The infrastructure that we have has suffered some changes. Changes that has been demanded by the change of merchandise, the diversity of it, and at the same time the growth of the merchandise. The pandemic, we have spoken of the topic of e-commerce as a conditioning that demanded from us to implement operations that before we didn't contemplate. The management of e-commerce in a fiscalized precinct, in the way that we do it via house, definitely required a different infrastructure than the one that we had. Like you see in this graph, most of the volume of the operations that we manage through the airport has Asia as a destination. The second group of important countries is Europe, then USA, and then in a lower scale, South America. That is the importance of the countries to which we send the information. And this is another very important point for operation air connectivity. The routes that we have with Asia are fundamentally headed by Qatar Pacific, Korean Airlines, Atlas, and Cargunos. They represent a traceability that very important that we have with the rest of the world. And in Europe, we have Air France, Cargo Lux, and Lufthansa. And airlines, Mexican airlines or Latin Americans like Union, Macer, Aeromexico, and Copa, that it is growing right now. Copa, even though does not have cargoes to Guadalajara, if its fleet of airplanes and passengers have been moving cargo, which makes that eventually, in a couple of months, they have plans that for March they could bring in a cargo airplane in Copa. So that is a need of having the needed connectivity to be able to see to the needs of the different origins and destinations to which the shipments have to go to. Here we have the frequencies that we have in the airport in Guadalajara. Here we see Qatar and Emirates that have just stopped their operations temporarily to Guadalajara. But we are working with them to continue operating in Guadalajara. And we need to operate new destinations and origins and to work closely with Singapore Airlines to increase connectivity with Asia. That still in those places we have a lot of merchandise that is stopped or waiting to be moved. At the same time, we continue talking with Turkish that is also interested and is moving merchandises through Guadalajara through different cargoes like these ones. Apart from the carriers, we also have the connections of passengers that move some cargo as well. In this flight of Aeromexico, Guadalajara, Madrid, it has been a great success in that sense. It is we have three frequencies, Guadalajara, Madrid, that brings and takes 20 tons in each flight. So it has made that the cargo that before reached Mexico City now will be managed through Guadalajara. This is what, in a way, Guadalajara offers in the movement of cargo. Guadalajara has been known as a cluster of the electronic industry and automotive, but in the last years it has had a great development. All of the industry of agro-foods. The agro, Jalisco, and the states around it have become a center of producers of foods from the field, and Guadalajara, the center of logistic transportation of perishable products in Mexico. And that has come to complete the needs that the airlines need to ensure their cargo on the way back. These type of products represent an advantage to be able to give continuity and stability to what we require. Where are we going to? We, together with the airport, definitely to bring the concept that Guadalajara will be or turn into a logistic hub of Mexico in the West. But at the same time could be an infrastructure that is very important for the movement of cargo Central and South America. That Guadalajara will turn into a logistic hub of Latin America could be done through increasing the critical masses that fly from our countries in Central and South America towards Mexico and be able to connect through all of the connectivity that we have established in Guadalajara with the cargoes to Asia and Europe. This idea, that is an idea that comes to motivate and develop the international commerce among other countries. We think that through the development of this infrastructure and the development of information among the countries, this could take us to have and to be more effective, more efficient on the building of this connectivity that will allow to move merchandises from our countries to Asia, which is the one that is demanding this type of sales. So here we need to assign some tasks. It is important to identify the area of opportunities that as countries we have. Yesterday we spoke of the industry, the SMEs, as the great opportunity that they have through the platforms of international commerce to be able to offer the produce and the connectivity through the different hubs of cargo could really be an opportunity of development of all of this industry. It is necessary to identify areas and the need to share information as a basis to obtain connectivity and this critical mass that we need to move. So the collaboration among institutions of the World Trade Centers in all Latin America may create and construct that motor needed to strengthen the commercial exchange and create a virtuous circle that we're looking for. The important thing is how we organize ourselves, and maybe this will be a task that we will take home to then continue and create. Thank you very much. Thank you, Ricardo. And you are the brand ambassadors that are incredible of the brand of World Trade Center. Today, there are more than 40 World Trade Centers participating in this conference. How can I practically help or the World Trade Center global network with more than 300 or 400 and more countries to find new investors and markets? Well, I think it's very important to have a communication that is closer with the different offices. I have had the opportunity of contacting offices in China of WTC. Carlos has done me the favor of passing contacts, and we have had some talks with them. We believe that all of the part of reaching Chinese companies, Europeans, and Americans is very important because many don't know about us. They don't know how they can make business in Mexico. So, like I said before, I think that being part of this branding opens many doors, and the companies give an easiness and tranquility to be able to come to Mexico. I think that suddenly I feel that we are disconnected. And I believe it will be worthwhile to make an effort of having this type of events, at least virtual, more often, and to have them by geographical zones of interest. I think that the topic of Latin America and invite the WTCs of the rest of the world for them to see what Latin America is doing and do it the same way with the different geographical zones. And to have present the advantages of each of us, because even though we're part of the same brand, we are very different what we do one and the other. So I believe we can have good synergies and complements. But to begin with, I think we do need to make an effort to visit or try to contact with companies for them to know us and to know everything that we offer. So always in the office, we talk about the brand, and when we show it to clients that go to the park, because to the park we have clients from all over the world. Right now we have just signed 3 companies, La Tyson Group and a pair of European companies, Franke from Switzerland and an Italian one that I can't tell you the name, but part of what we show them when they came at the beginning is this: we are part of the World Trade Center Association, so that has helped us a lot. But they are the ones that come to us. It is important to go and look for them because we are letting go many opportunities. So we would need to have a a tool of marketing abroad as an association, more robust or more in contact. I think this should be a two-way street. Francisco, how can Global Network help? Definitely, I think that all of the daily problems that we have, at the end of the day, we come to the same conclusion: communication, the fact of not knowing really what someone or some other WTC in another city is doing. For example, I knew well about San Luis Potosí. I know the park. I've been there. I didn't know, and I feel really bad. I didn't know how big you WTC Guadalajara was until I was told off by Gabi last night and told me what they're really doing. But this is part of the problem. We are together, but we're not together. So communication is an area of opportunity that is very big. The fact that he can be doing business of a certain type and that in a matter I can copy and implement this in another place, this should be a complement, a synergy with him. This is a win-win for everybody. From the point of view of World Trade Center Association, what is your role, your work? I think what you just have done in the partnership that you signed with the USA for the services of commerce, it's really important because for many people we speak about World Trade Center and we think their offices and we think their corporate offices or that we are excellent hosts to do congresses, and really there is much more behind each of the WTCs, at least what we get to know, we that practically have not been a long time in this business. Well said. Thank you, Ricardo. Well, Robin, I think that Mexico has always been or put in a platform of opportunities, of great opportunities. And right now, the topic that is most important and that we have as a project, the country should see to is nearshoring. That is a topic that has been there for years. We didn't speak about this situation. The microphone is not working. Se le fue el micrófono. I think that the treaty, the new treaty of the USMCA between Mexico and USA and Canada will create new opportunities for growing. So we need to be prepared with that infrastructure. And I think the building of industrial parks, it's a demand that today the country has in a way that before we didn't see. It seems that the offer of parks is still below the demand. So, so that the World Trade Centers have dedicated and advocated to the offer of demand, I think it is an infrastructure that is indispensable to be able to see these new ideas of international trade through these new manufacturers that want to come closer to the USA. We have a couple of more minutes. And a question. 2 weeks ago, the Secretary of Commerce, the Secretary of State, was here in Mexico for the US-Mexico high-level economic dialogue. And this turn into new initiatives to improve relationships and more tight cooperation in the projection of semiconductors and electrical conduits. The question is, this initiative will bring a new investment generation and technology and an expansion in the logistic operations in Mexico? Yes, sure. All of this new need of the USA of making sure of having all of these critical parts and strategic parts for the development of safety will need infrastructure, national infrastructure, industrial parks, infrastructure, and a series of services that we will require. Road infrastructure, railway, and the new service infrastructure. The services in customs and management of merchandises in foreign trade will demand in a growing manner the need of infrastructure, and not only physical infrastructure but technological infrastructure is in it's mostly needed and needs to develop in a quick way. We saw this when after the pandemic we needed and we had a growth of volume that was very important, and the space cannot be habilitated from now till tomorrow. So technology opens possibilities of being more efficient in the movement of shipments. So being focused always in what is logistic and technology is very important. Francisco? Yes. Challenges, we have many. In Mexico, definitely. I am a passionate of the industry and my experiences in the industry. Mexico and its people is the diamond in the rough. We can use human resources that Mexico has. The people are anxious and willing to learn, develop, and improve their level and quality of life. So there we have an opportunity for the World Trade Centers. Here we have Javi. Javi, we talked yesterday. There are so many opportunities from the point of view of academics that the WTCs could play an important role when we offer services for the development of the people towards those new technologies. We are practically in Texas. We are seeing what is happening in Texas today. With the growth, exponential growth that they have with new investors, especially in the Austin area, with Tesla, with Samsung, investments of thousands of millions of dollars, practically. And the main problem that they have are the people.
There are no people. There are no people to work, and there's no time to train them. And the investment is there, the plant is there, the equipment is there, orders. So we are not moving at the rhythm that we need to. We are not focusing on what is most important. And at the end of the day, what is most important is and always will be human capital. We have different institutions, such as with SABI in Spain, people who can have modules, who can train, give courses for development in certain technologies, what is being used in other countries, and to be the promoters and to do a networking, not only between partners and promoting investments, which is what gives us our money on our table, but also to offer professional services in order to develop human talent. A word on the question of investments. It's a very important point that on the microchips, I think that it is a national security topic for the US. 80% of the chips are produced in Taiwan. And we all know what the situation in Taiwan is today and the risk it represents for the US. So, from last year, we have been looking into how we can bring companies, microchip companies. We understand that there are very important requirements for water, for energy. And I'll come to this point, this topic. As Ricardo, you were talking about infrastructure, we believe that the energy topic is what's most important on the agenda, at least as an industrial park. But microchips have an enormous area of opportunity, especially Guadalajara. We would like to have a park here. We are about to begin with a park here, and part of the drivers that we've seen in Guadalajara is a specialized labor force in electronics, which we don't have in San Luis Potosí or other states. In Guadalajara, it's called the Mexican Silicon Valley for a reason. It's been preparing young people for many, many years in electronics. It has a very good competitive advantage in that sector. And in addition, we have a population. This is the second largest city in Mexico in its population, which makes it very attractive. And we think that it has everything to be to support the United States in this topic, which it cannot do alone. There are two terms here which I think are very important, which sometimes we confuse: near-shoring, which is what Mexico does, and the real shoring, which the U.S. is looking for the reshoring. The U.S. is seeking to bring back companies to the U.S. These two components are what make trade so intense with the U.S. The U.S. cannot do this by itself. It does want to bring a lot back, but it knows it needs a partner such as us, especially with labor force. Before, it was focused on income, the differential of the minimum salary in the U.S. and in Mexico in the last years. U.S. has gone up, and we are basically stagnated. What has gone up in Mexico is really laughable in the minimum wage, but now the U.S. has no labor force. People don't want to work anymore there. So we think this is a very important point of inflection for Mexican business people who must invest in education, but must also invest in awareness that the labor force we want is qualified, which must be paid for. Don't want cheap labor force. You were speaking about China. I don't want Mexico to become a producer of the products that China doesn't want to make anymore. We want high value. This is what will be reflected in the quality of life of Mexico. In the end, it's an advantage for the U.S. because with all of the migration issue, the U.S. would not benefit from having such an inflow of migration all the time. Or at least if there is migration, have it with a higher level of education. So this is what the topic is. The three examples of the worldwide are logistics services combined with real estate. Are you planning any to build an iconic building with the World Trade Center name? That's the question. Tomorrow. Well, before the pandemics, we wanted to build a building in high rise in San Luis, offices used, mixed use building. But with the pandemics, we believe that offices is the most affected sector in real estate. So for now, we're not going to be investing there, but we have to continue thinking. We never can throw away such an iconic topic, but we won't be doing it in San Luis Potosí. I have to pay attention to my friend, partner, Jorge Acevedo, who's telling me, yes, that we are going to build one. He's telling me from over there that we should build one. But definitely, the project in Nuevo Laredo has an office building, a mixed use with services also for housing in the same building, which will be the iconic building for both Laredos. I hope that Jorge doesn't scold me with what I'm about to say. I think it is public information already, not just, check it on networks for your information, but maybe you already know. The National Customs Agency of Mexico, which is U.S. Customs, but on the Mexican side, is changing its offices to Nuevo Laredo. So there is a project by them, which is very aggressive, to practically, in a year and a half or 2 years, be operating already an agency in Nuevo Laredo. This will bring from 8 to 10,000 jobs at the federal government level with this agency and all of the services that this includes, which they will need. So by far for us, this is a challenge, as we will have to be the best option by far and the best supplier of services that this will require. Congratulations, thank you, but we'll see in a year how we're doing. Guadalajara World Trade Center is already an icon in the region. We don't need a building to be an icon, but yes, definitely the World Trade Centers need to give a series of services which international commerce requires. Logistics services are a very important pillar of this, but real estate developments are also very important, because from the perspective of training, education, creating networks between different associations, and how we can provide services to those who are participating in foreign commerce, they need adequate facilities. So we do require certain infrastructure to provide services to those who are in international commerce. And what could be better than a World Trade Center building with such offices and services? So the last question in English by Jorge. Federico's working very closely with this alliance. He is part of, he's a representative on the Pacific Alliance. Maybe he can answer this question a bit better. Or maybe you did. You had the question, right? It was your question. No se oye. We can't hear it. So it's been very significant, and thank you for developing and organizing this event, because the Pacific Alliance is advancing at this time, not only politically, where there is a lot of discussion. All the export is just right now saliva. There's not a lot of effective exporting. But the incorporation of Singapore, as Singapore has signed, it's joining the Pacific Alliance at the beginning of this year. As a result, Singapore has a logistic ADN since its origin, NDA. Ay, digo, DNA, and we will incorporate into the Pacific Alliance. What else? We need logistics. We need connectivity with Latin America. And in that connectivity with Latin America is what we're working on. What did the Singapore government say? I want to have direct connectivity with Latin America. Let's do it with Mexico first. We had officers here from the Ministry of the Economy of Singapore. They were here last month in the World Trade Center. We had meetings with them. Next month, we have a video conference with Singapore and with Edmonton people in Canada in order to be able to build a scheme for this connectivity and for this life of the Pacific Alliance connected to the needs that we have with respect to supply for the Asian sector. There's something that I also wanted to comment on in this sense. I'm very happy to hear what you're saying, but at a certain moment, I think about the electronic sector. We already had semiconductors here in Guadalajara. We already made semiconductors and produced them. You know where the plants went? They went to Taiwan, to China. Everything we had here, we had to just leave. So now the inverse process is coming. We need the support of Wall Street and the US industry to be convinced to bring all of this back. It's not us. We had, and they took it away. So I'm very happy that this new trend is happening. This situation that we're living now with Taiwan, with Singapore, is something that we have seen. They're knocking on our door. Chile right now, it wants to have a much more intense interaction with us in maritime and sea and air modalities to strengthen their foreign commerce worldwide and to not depend only on their agreement with the US. They also want to be in the Pacific Alliance, have this agreement with Mexico. We were with Peru and Colombia establishing the relations so that through the World Trade Centers, we can see how we strengthen the needs, industrial needs, to face these requirements of putting our products in the world market in a more timely fashion and with all of the movements needed for this world commerce. I just want to make a comment. Yesterday we spoke with Gabi too about this, and I was telling her that regionalization, bringing again this nearshoring. I know that. I know about that already. I know all of that. That was the flavor of the month of the 80s, and we felt, But what's most important at the end of the day is the government's role. This is why it's so important to be able to have a presence, to have a muscle before a government so that they don't take decisions, the political decisions, which go one way and another, which then take investments to countries in Asia, because we know what this is like. The governments change every 4 years in the US and 6 years in Mexico. So those swing decisions it's very important to be able to participate, to be able to look for the way in which if they come here, welcome. But don't leave so easily. We need to see which way we can anchor them here. And so they leave a presence here, their operations definitely here in Mexico. We already experienced this. Some of us who have been here for a few years, this already happened to us. We don't have any South American companies or Central American companies. So I think this is a big area of opportunity, very large opportunity. I am going to now speak about those here from the Latin American offices who are interested in doing business with Mexico and the US. I think we can be an excellent bridge for access to the largest market in the world. So, welcome. I hope we could have a lot more trade with them. When we were mentioning the companies we have in the park, we don't have any. Yesterday, I was speaking with people from Colombia, Peru, Argentina, Chile, and I think there is a huge potential. I think also that Central America is a pole which is not very well developed. The migration problem we have here reflects that problem. We would have to expand our efforts in order to have a more competitive region. So our Thank you so much. We would ask you please to stay with us so we could give you this token of recognition for your participation. And at this time, we would like to give this to Ricardo Colomé. Thank you also. And now our panel member, Francisco Javier Solís. Likewise, we would like to thank Mario Weiss. And thank you also for your role as moderator to Robin Van Puyenbroek. Thank you so much. A strong applause to everyone. And now a photograph, please. Thank you. To all of you, thank you so much for having been in this first panel this morning. So please now go to our coffee break. We only have 5 minutes in order to optimize our time. Please go, come back, so that we can then continue with our next panel. Thank you. It's very important also to say
Thanking you that you are still here and inviting anyone that is outside, please come in and take your seat so we can continue. And we will receive our panelist, Jaime Granados, Division Chief of Investment of the Inter-American Bank of Development. Welcome. Then they will have a discussion or a talk with World Trade Center of Monterrey, the CEO, and applause for him. And we invite you to begin. Good morning, everybody. Jaime, it is a pleasure to have you here with us. I think that in these minutes that we will have the opportunity of talking, having a conversation with the audience, maybe we can move them a little bit and talk not only about the reality of nearshoring, but the myths, and to dimension this, because it is a reality, everyone is talking about it, but how to put it on the table, how to eat it, is not a topic that is so easy. I think it requires a collective effort. I remember some years ago that I remember reading a book by George Friedman that spoke about the next following 100 years. And they said, who challenges the seas, domains the world. Recently, there is a new book in the USA by Peter Zion, which I think you have read, talks about these fatalistic issues and will be the dominating country worldwide. And it has exactly the same argument. It says USA, with the size of the army and the air force that they have, will continue being for many years the leader, the world leader. This gives food to say, okay, if there will be, Jaime, a fight against pachyderms between USA, ideologically and commercial, the nearshoring and reshoring and all of the other terms that you are going to share is a reality. But we will have to put this in its just dimension, because apart from that fight, I believe that in an organic way, the flows of capital will always be, and it has always been, will follow the best bidder. So we have to see that more further than this need of a reaccommodation in a regional sector in this earth, there will also be a topic of developing, local developing, that every country will turn on their own because automatically they will be attractive to be able to bring this investment. Jaime, the expert on this is you. I am here more as a person that will answer your presentation, which I'm sure will be of enormous good for everyone. Thank you very much, Eugenio. It's a pleasure to be here in Guadalajara. This is my first time in this city. I have been in Mexico 60, 70 times, but this is the first time here. It's a pleasure in a very pretty place. And thank you for the World Trade Center for the invitation, because I love having this opportunity of sharing with you our experiences, our vision, what we have been doing with the Latin American countries. And let's begin. Previous to begin, I want to tell you a story to see if we make this not so arid. The fact is that I am from Costa Rica. I live in Washington, but I'm in contact with the social dynamic over there, and I participate in a Facebook group on airplane aviation. Costa Rica is a small country, and each time a very big plane comes, in on the wall we put the time that it came. So last year, on the wall, we began to see that something interesting was happening. There was an Autonox 124. I think there are 4 motors. It's not the one with 6. And we saw the trajectory that they began in Vietnam, went through India, Cabo Verde, Caracas, and Costa Rica. And the following week, the same thing happened. There was a pattern, a sustainable pattern of behavior, of and a gigantic airplane that came, and the only thing we knew on the wall is that it brought cargo for a private company. And so we began to speculate, what is happening? What is this? Because why a plane like this? Why does it go through these strange places? And that company is not certified to fly through the USA or Europe. That's why it goes through there, etc., etc. Everyone is generating knowledge, when in reality what was happening was that the microchip plant Intel was moving equipment from Asia to Costa Rica. And Costa Rica, they had a manufacturing plant, and to optimize logistics in the year 2012, they moved the manufacturing towards and to be closer to China. But today, they are in a process that is the opposite. It's not that they were closing plants, but they were reopening the manufacturing plant in Costa Rica, and the plant had maintained, but it had transformed to bring services of back office, research and development. But the manufacturing had gone over there. So that solved the mystery, and that puts us or gives us a clear example of what has been happening. Last month, another investor was in my office that had an American from Ohio who had decided to come to Costa Rica. And I asked him why. And he said, I produce bombs for agricultural usage, but they're very sophisticated. I produce them in China and I sell them in the US. But they are charging 25% in taxes and tariffs, and now they are claiming that the carbon print is too large and the geopolitics is very uncomfortable because at any time this may complicate my business. So I come here and open a small plant in Costa Rica. I have access thanks to the USMCA treaty, free trade agreement treaty, and that is going to solve a problem. I'm going to keep on producing in China, but I'm going to provide the US market from here. So they are stories that are simple to illustrate something that has been happening. But like Eugenio says, we have quite amount of questions, and there are myths, like Eugenio says. And on that topic, we can talk on a series of slides that I prepared for you to be able to generate a conversation and to clear up some of the topics. We're not going to clear up everything because there are many open questions, but we're going to begin to see how we do. You know about the 3, 4 slides. We will pass them really quickly. They are the value chains. You know very well that the story goes back from globalization of the 90s. They are fragmenting and optimizing globally this production, goods and services. They come from places where the best advantage is identified to incorporate them to where they belong according to that comparative advantage and the usage of a structure of cost, and that is where they send to the market, the biggest markets in the northern hemisphere: USA, Europe, Japan, Korea. So it implies that process of optimization. And it is important to say that more or less 50% of the world commerce implies chains, productive chains, participation of a certain good, and a global value chain. That is something really important. If we take into account the world commerce, it's about $25 trillion. Trillions in English is a bigger number than trillions in Spanish. But we see that really it is a number that is really big. Maybe you have seen schemes like this many years ago in the Financial Times. I think they illustrated what we want to say here. But using an iPhone, well, we want to use an airplane, the 787, where you can see all that fragmentation of the production implied that there were provisioning of certain points of the earth. A couple of months ago, I had the opportunity to go to Querétaro, and we were working with the people of Bombardier, and they showed us that they were in that dynamic. The fuselage of the Bombardier of certain models was produced from Querétaro. More or less 52 fuselage were made a year and were sent from there, and we saw where they were mounting it. They were ready on a platform that was about to leave at 4 p.m. on its way to a point in Texas where it was going to be incorporated to another series of process, and that was going to end up in Canada where they made the whole of the airplane. This, you know it, you have seen it in the market, you are in the heart of all of the processes, and I'm not going to go in depth on this. Let's take into account something important. When we speak about nearshoring, we can speak about very phenomenon simultaneously. The leader company may take many decisions. It may establish a subsidiary in another country so that from there optimize the productive process, or buy a special merger or acquisition to in that subsidiary in the country, and from that subsidiary they can have the suppliers tier 1, tier 2, tier 3, and so on, and they will pass and use the subsidiary plant, and this plant will sell to the matrix or transfer the end part or the to Boeing, for example, in USA. Boeing has a subsidiary in Australia, Boeing Australia, and they do what they have to do, and they pass the finished product towards the USA. Or the other model is to have relationships of suppliers with different companies that are specialized, that Boeing also does. Boeing buys from Mitsubishi, Curtiss-Wright, Rolls-Royce, and they have suppliers that may be local or international, and all of that network of supplies integrate and is optimized, and we reach to what we have today on the matter of global value chains. Another dimension which is important to take into account before we begin is the fact that we need to consider, and this is actually one of the great topics, the topic of distances that needs to be done in order to optimize the global value chain. If we fragment the process and send to 5,000 miles away, we need to bring that good or service all the way back, and we need to take into account the carbon footprint, the times, the risks that this implies. Here we have the example of a tennis ball, the ones that you use in Wimbledon, that has a very limited number of inputs. It is a tennis ball, and we need to add the mileage that the inputs have of this tennis ball. That mileage adds 50,000 miles, 80,000 kilometers that needs to be covered for just a ball. So here you've spoken about the challenges of logistics, third party logistics, fourth party logistics, all of that to be able to cover this type of challenges that the international trade has today, and that it implies important questions today. Because we have seen that the consumer is demanding that the carbon print should be restricted, should be safe, should have safety, and if the emission should not be exaggerated. So a great demand, and this has to do with sustainability of the earth by products that have a shorter carbon print, and this has an important relationship with the topic of nearshoring today. What have been traditionally the benefits of participating on a global value chain? Because the public policies of the countries are pushing companies or structure public policies that articulate and ease the participation and promotion of the package or the productive structure of a country in the global value chains. Here we have some, the increase of productivity, and we have seen with macro data and empiric evidence that an increase of 10% of participation in global value chains increases 1.6 the average production of countries, and between 11 and 14% of GDP. This is a guarantee, but it is an enhancement, a way of improving the productivity of my companies and also the growth of the GDP per capita. Right now in Latin America and the Caribbean, The topic is the low productivity of a productive weave. There are topics where we need to work, and that's what we promote. The most participation of these weaving participative people. It also implies a diversification because it allows you to work in certain stages of the working area instead of dominating all of them. That participation is a reflex. I asked in Querétaro, why is it that here you only make the fuselage? Because they develop spontaneously the advantage of being able to make the fuselage here. We don't have it on the wings, we don't have it on the avionics, we don't have it in the front fuselage, but we have it here on this that is particular. And generating more and better employment is the challenge that our countries have, especially as part of the recovery of the post-pandemic. Some countries, including mine, went up to 25% of open unemployment, without talking about the non-formal jobs that are around 40 or 50%. The generation of most employment may be promoted via participation of global chains, of value chains. And there may be other dimensions. The topic of transfer of technology. We've been determining empirically how the participation of value chains, the bringing of investment that allows us to have global productive chains, allow us to transfer knowledge. Knowledge that is not only created in the company, but when the employee goes out, takes him with him and generates a culture of excellence, quality, seriousness that maybe if he hadn't participated in that company, if he hadn't been related, he wouldn't have acquired it because our cultural environment doesn't necessarily give him. That is the situation of Latin America and the Caribbean, and that has been worldwide. Migration, participation in global processes usually generate as an end product something of excellence. It is nourished by good practices, etc. Latin America has had a limited participation in global value chains, CGVs. I will talk about later how Mexico has overcome some of these topics, but it is clear that there has been commercial restrictive issues. There has been high logistic costs, and we've spoken about that. There are wages that are higher than in Asia, even though we know that China is beginning to increase their wages, which opens opportunities for you, clearly. They are focused on exports of commodities, and I speak about South America, where there is a great challenge of bringing more added value to the agricultural production, soy and wheat and corn, that should be transformed and add more value. Distance is also a weight. I'm not talking about Monterrey, but I'm talking Sao Paulo or Santiago or Buenos Aires, where the distance is enormous and the typical low levels of industrialization. We know the reality, focused to the topic of it hasn't been so aggressive yet. The economy has not allowed this aggressive transition to more industrialization in Latin America and the Caribbean. And we are being left behind, according to the Asia and Europe, in the matter of participation in trade in CGVs. So there is a challenge here, and here are some numbers that indicate it. When we see the added value of foreigners that is incorporated in exports, we see it on the bottom line. The European Union, on average, 2016-2019, they had 43.3% of participation. And from the 90s till now, it's been increasing from 34, 37, and 43%. To Asia goes around the same trajectory, growing. Their percentage is 33%. We go from 31, 32, 33, while Latin America in general, we see a growth, even though there are variations, 9.2, 8.2, and 18.1%, but really well below other regions of the world, in such a way that we see that there is a breach here, a gap that we need to close. When you want to summarize the economical story of the last 30 years, Adán Guzmán is a really famous economist that makes economical stories and from China or from the West. But here we talk about 30 years. One may qualify and show it in this graph as a process that is dynamic from the 90s to the 2000s, and it begins to get stuck from 2010 to 2020, and consequently the percentage of commerce that participate in global value chains begins in a matter to get stuck. This puts us and to ask what is happening. This is another discussion, but the fact that it is coming up in nearshoring, probably this will have to do with it. China is more expensive. The technology has allowed to revert processes that before we tertiary, it was tertiary, but now via technology, I can bring them back to the metropolis, and I do not need to fight with the logistic cost and geopolitics. I bring this back to the metropolis, and from here I make other processes. That is notable. But also, I have seen the commercial trade war, the instability in geopolitics, and COVID. COVID sank all of these tendencies for a couple of years because we are now recovering, thank God, and we are reaching to levels of trade pre-pandemic, which is important both in trade and in the matter of investment.
So now we can speak about what the opportunities are. How can we assimilate what's happening now? Because the Inter American Development Bank, we see this as an opportunity which presents challenges, which we'll speak of. But what can we do? The trends have been disruptive with respect to global value change. And the main factors are the ones summarized here. There's a process to shortening the global value chains because of de-risking markets, which is leaving dangerous places and go somewhere where there is less risk and where there is greater less time to market. And here you are very well positioned. It's a privilege vis-a-vis the US market. There's an interest in ensuring the supply of strategic materials as vaccines. You can see that from the White House, they have launched an initiative to begin to study those topics as they have a great incidence on national security. Vaccines are very important for national security. 50% of certain medications, which are basic, and sometimes 70%, come from China. And there are active ingredients, there are some chemical precursors from China. We mentioned also the microchips, which are produced in very vulnerable areas such as Taiwan, which is an ally but exposed to very strong and specific particular geopolitical stresses. All of this affects national security of any country, but especially in the US, it's very sensitive topic. So they are seeking ways in which to identify projects, approaches, allies, nation allies. So now we want ally shoring, democracy shoring, are concepts that come up, friend shoring. So countries such as Mexico, and I would even add Central America and Colombia, Chile, all those that I remember, these can do countries, these strategic allies of the US, could be very well positioned in order to promote the integration of their industries into global value chains by nearshoring, which is a process which is totally private. It's run by the market. There can be public policies for incentives promoting this, but it's a market process which will take time to assess and to complete. There will be companies who want to do this, other companies who do not need this, sectors where it's urgent to do this, and others where they feel they are fine. So This should not be a case where I say this is happening massively, but the probabilities in certain sectors in a certain term can maybe experience on a significant nearshoring phenomena. Companies are also moving merchandise, reducing their carbon footprint. Nationalism and geopolitical tensions have grown, which create barriers to commerce and business. We've seen an increase in customs tariffs in many countries. We've seen problems in technology, strategic technology control, telecommunication, canceling visas. So there is a tension which brought this individual that I had met a few months ago, who I convinced that he had to come to this side of the world in order to really be able to not be affected by this kind of influences. And of course, the COVID crisis, which has brought friction to global supply chains and has increased demand for resilience and speed, and which has brought the sea freight crisis. So there are many factors which have been a condition to this reconfiguration of the global value chain as we have seen it. There are people who strongly believe that this is a topic that is here to stay. So I will reference analysis, assessment from the White House, especially in those sensitive factors such as computer chips, electric vehicle batteries, pharmaceutical products, critical minerals used for electronic components, etc. But also defense topics, public health topics, information technology, transportation, energy, and food topics that are very important to any modern or primitive society, and which today they have a very high profile, and there will be clear opportunities in these topics in the immediate future. Companies are starting to react to this new global context. We have seen surveys and studies, analysis, where the evidence shows there is a trend for companies to increasing resilience in their supply chains. They don't want to go through any trauma after COVID. They want to change. 54% want to change their supply chain. Gardner tells us that in certain surveys shows that a third of the companies think about restructuring their supply chains very soon. UBS tells us 76% of the US companies with operations in Asia have relocated or are thinking of doing this outside Asia. So we're all talking about the same thing. There is no strong data, precise predictions about what this will imply, how world commerce.
Because of nearshoring. And when you spoke about 40 or 50% for Mexico today, sadly, 80% of the national recovery obeys directly or indirectly to exports. What would be our loving country if it wasn't due to the fact that we are close to the biggest economy that the world has known in the last 160 years, and we have other treaties? Jaime, I would love to listen to your point of view on the following. 99.8% of the companies are micro, small, and medium. Productive chains is estimated that only 1%. 1% of the companies are linked to value chains. And the whole group obeys to exports, and they are from companies that are big and are, all of them are big. But the bulk of what these big companies buy are bought from other big companies. So what to do with the critical mass of the companies? What do we do to move the needle of our reality if we don't do something with SMEs? But I forgot. We have one question from the audience. El mundo sin fronteras es un gran reto para las empresas chicas y medianas. ¿Cómo sobrevivir en un mundo colaborativo versus un mundo It is a social challenge, economic and social. I have 2 minutes to answer, and I'll do it this way. That is a great topic of development of commercial trade in Latin America and the Caribbean. Our focus is we need to promote commerce in an inclusive and sustainable manner. Social inclusion, territorial and environmental. That is the key for today, and that is the work that we need to do and is facing us. A couple of years ago, like 10, when I was from Mexico, we had to come because we needed to make an evaluation of the programs in Mexico. And what I found was that there was a universe of 30 million multinationals registered and 3 million or 4 million of SMEs, and that the program to generate linkages that were productive was $1 million a year. That to me told me, okay, you are losing the opportunity of life to do those linkages, to democratize the opportunities of trade. That is the great challenge that we all have, to bring more people on the territories, bring women, bring Afro descendants, indigenous people, starting from programs that will help them to use this opportunity. But that is done with talent, technical talent, quality systems, innovation systems, good logistic cost of energy and water, so that SMEs will use the opportunity that there is in the international trade. Fabulous way to close, Jaime. I knew it would be a really excellent chat to listen to you. So the great villain is time. All of us, thank you very much to all of you for having been listening to us. And Jaime, I thank you sincerely on behalf of the global network of World Trade Centers, and especially the Latin American one, that we heard your knowledge with a great pleasure. It was a pleasure to be here, and thank you very much for your attention. Thank you for this conversation, this dialogue, and we want to give you a token of recognition to each of you. Right now, we are going to give it to Eugenio Reyes. Thank you very much. And also, token of recognition to Jaime Granados. Thank you very much. And now the photograph, please. This is just life. Thank you very much. Thank you once more. And we are reaching our final moment of our working days today. Thank you very much to those who have been following via streaming, and thank you for being with us. And it is time to ask for the closure of the event. Robin, an applause for him again, please. He was with us before. Now for the closing.
organizing this and for being such a tremendous host. So with that, Mr. Senor Lopez Rocha, I have a token of appreciation from the World Trade Centers Association for you. So if you would please want to come on stage and also invite Mr. Remy Schwab, the vice chair of our board, and Eugenio and Ignacio, if he's still here, the board directors, and also Carlos Ronderos, our regional director, to present you this token of appreciation.
Thank you very much to all of you. Thank you, Robin. Thanks to our friend Carlos Landeros and all of his team, the team of World Trade Center Association, and of course, thank you and recognition to all of the team of Guadalajara's World Trade Center. With great enjoyment and of course with the support and coordination of Carlos World Trade Center Association, we had the task of recovering the being host that we had before and to receive, as always in Jalisco, with open arms, our dear friends and visitors and colleagues of the World Trade Centers that here in presence and through streaming have followed us. Of course, trying to do some comments or to make some comments on the richness of the presentations is very difficult for me. I'm not qualified for this, but I think the team in its due moment will give a document summarizing everything that we have learned in these 2 days, that also take notes of the issues and what you worry about and about the big challenges that we have as an association, as World Trade Centers in particular, and of course, as Latin America, as a region. Mexico has conditions to use this opportunity, but the challenge also, like we have said in World Trade Center Guadalajara, is that we need to link the supply chains of Latin America, and that from Mexico or through Mexico or with Mexico, we will be the entry port to the world, Asia, and USA, of course. I only want to, apart from thanking everybody, I would like to give a little bit of history. Almost 34 years ago, in November 17, if I well remember, of 1988, a group of entrepreneurs from Jalisco got the task of going to the assembly in Bombay's WTC. Remember, Carlos, that we were there, with the dream and illusion of being part and protagonist in this trade. Mexico only had been a couple of years since '86, I think, of having incorporated what was then the CAT, now the Worldwide Organization of Commerce. In those days, it seems that who was trying to do some free trade, international trade, were masochists. It was a whole challenge that today we are a world that is smaller. Today there is a culture, international culture of business in Mexico and many countries in Latin America. And today, even though of the events that we have suffered, we are coming out all together strengthened. COVID was a test for human beings in the sense of health, commercial integration, but the only road that there is to follow exchanging goods, merchandises, investment, knowledge, culture, so that through this prosperity will be a reality for our people and for our countries. This is just a farewell. So long. The value and the power of meeting does not have limits. I am sure that many of us came out really well satisfied, hoping that soon, Carlos, you will call us once more. Thank you very much. Happy and go home safely.
Now we would like to ask you to stay here on the stage. We'd also like to give you this token of appreciation and a very strong hand, please, here for Mr. Aurelio Lopez Rocha. He couldn't leave without this token of appreciation. And now this is how we are closing. And thank you so much for having enjoyed this, experienced this, and staying with us along these 2 days of activities, which are not over. We are just finishing point as such, but we will be continuing with the regional meeting. This regional meeting of WTCA, which is in the room next door. For those of you who are having those meetings, please go there. So we will we wait for you at the next point, those of you via streaming, so that you can schedule this, and then greetings wherever you are. Thank you to all of you. Please schedule this, please program this. Next point, we will meet you there. Thank you to all who made